with her
she,
own
she,
hair.
she's got no boundaries, that
Yeah,
girl.
oh, no, she
Yeah.
don't. She don't. So she went upstairs and I opened the door and
What
Becky,
is she was so wild one time at Vacation Bible School? Yeah.
Yeah.
oh, she's wild in the service,
Now,
man.
does she live with him or does he have to show her visit him?
I'm not sure.
I don't
I don't
know.
know all the details there.
Because Marcella doesn't always have her,
Mm-mm.
you know. So I don't know.
I don't know how that works during the week.
Yeah.
She's here a lot on Sundays.
Yeah.
All right, we'll get started here. We're all the way to Joseph. We're in this is the last narrative piece of Genesis. We've gone through 3 major sections already, which would be creation through Noah, and then the Abraham story, and then the Jacob story, and now we're in our Joseph story. And this section is entire. It's the narrative is, and the language and everything about it. The way that it addresses the subject matter, it is entirely different from everything that's gone before, which leads to a lot of speculation about when it was written. Was it written later? Was it written for a different time? And so there's a lot. If you read commentaries on Genesis, you'll get a lot of different ideas about that, and all of them are valid because they just are. But at the same time, if you hold to the hypothesis that Moses is the author, then he definitely was writing to a people that would have been different in the sense of how they would have understood this particular narrative, because God, much like Esther, God is not mentioned a lot in the Joseph narrative. There's only 2 sections, a place in chapter 47, early on in 47, and then toward the end. And so we have these 2 places where the narrator kind of pokes his head in and says, see, this God that seems to be hidden in all this activity is actually in control. And this is how we know. Well, if this was being written for people that were wandering in the desert for 40 years because they had rebelled and had given up on what we might call a primitive idea of faith, where you just simply believe and trust that God is doing a thing, and maybe we're moving toward a more humanistic kind of faith where there's a minimalist God at work here, and he just kind of sits back and watches things, so that he operates by the hand of man, not by the hand of God. So you have these 2 broad extremes. And here in this narrative, we find that the writer's bringing us back to, not to a sinner so much, but returning to this idea, a necessary idea of faith, that this is God's program. And he's even called people into that program through the patriarchs, and that we're going to enjoy what he's doing as a matter of our faith and trust in him, our relationship with him. So Walter Brueggemann, who wrote a commentary, puts it this way: this narrative works in a subtle way between the primitivism, which I was describing, which believes too easily, and a humanism which is embarrassed about faith. I find our world in that same place today, where people just they're going to believe in this very primitive idea. You just gotta have faith, against this humanistic idea where people are almost embarrassed about having faith. It glances against the superiority of man. See, and so this writer is saying it speaks about in very concrete ways, but also very hidden ways, of the transcendence of God over all of it, so that you can find your place in either way. You can find yourself in this primitive expression of faith, or this very humanistic expression where they're denying faith. Take your pick. you're not going to escape the transcendence of God's work in it. So it's kind of comforting for those of us who are desirous of God to be in control and to see His hand at work and to know that He is bringing all of this about. And in that challenges both of those, because faith just can't be you got to have faith, because it does require some things of us.
Works is dead.
Yes, and then it doesn't allow for the humanistic approach to life, because that's an escape from God, and you can't escape Him. His transcendence exists. So Joseph, the whole story, from 37 to 52, gives us this picture. And so we're going to look at that as we move through. We will take notice of that. So what is God's goal in it? Brueggemann says it like this: His goal is the creation of a community of liberation. So written by Moses to a people that had come out of bondage and slavery for all those many years, and recognizing that even from the beginning, even as far back as Abraham, God is looking for a way to have a people that appreciate the freedom that He provides under His purview, under His will. And so Joseph reminds us of that again, that God has set forth a way to do this, but also teaching us the lesson of what we do to ourselves as we self-impose exile. There's times in our life where we just shoot ourselves in the foot. And we've already seen that in the Abraham story when he went to Egypt. We've seen it in the Jacob story and the whole thing with Laban and how he winds up in that mess. We've seen it in the Isaac story with Abimelech, and being sent away from place to place to place, and seeing how God has blessed him in that. And so we've seen it in all these things, and now we're going to see it in the story of Joseph. But it takes on a little stronger meaning for us, because Joseph doesn't do anything to be thrown into exile, but there he is. Okay? And so he must suffer through this hidden work of God in order to bring about what we find out to be God's whole purpose in the whole thing. Well, that's the whole suffering servant story that we find in Isaiah, that is placed over onto Jesus, not as a means of making sense of Isaiah or Jesus, but being the prophecy that prepares for our understanding of what the Son of Man would mean. And then the other thing that we find in this is that the dream that Joseph has, it doesn't ever end. It's laced with this vision of bowing down, and the bowing down and what it means for everyone, not just the brothers, but ultimately Egypt, and then the ultimately bowing down of the brothers when they finally realize who they're before. And so the writer allows for this extended narrative where we're in kind of an attention, we're in tension to see how this is going to work out, and what's going to happen when ultimately they do bow down. What kind of person is Joseph going to be? How has God shaped him along the way where he's able to respond as on behalf of the one that's been hidden through the whole story? So for people that were had become unsure about their God, possibly because they're wandering in the desert with this man Moses provides them with this story that says, you may not see him now, and you may think that all of this is going the wrong way, but see what he did with Joseph. So that's kind of the overview here as we move through this. All right, so Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. And these are the family records of Jacob. At 17 years of age, Joseph tended sheep with his brothers. The young man was working with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah. his father's wives, and he brought a bad report about them to their father. It's never a good idea, is it? Oh, yeah. That's the other theme that runs through this is bad family. We see it over and over. This is the beginning. It starts out as this is the record, and the first thing they put in the record is that Joseph's a tattletale on his brothers. So this is all to set up what comes, right? Now Israel, and this happens several times where they go back and forth with the name. Now Israel loved Joseph more than his other sons because Joseph was born to him in his old age, and he made a long sleeve robe for him. Wasn't the only reason why Joseph was his favorite. Who was his mother?
The one,
His other favorite. Yeah. So he made a long sleeve robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all the others, they hated him and could not bring themselves to speak peaceably to him. An important word there. So the long sleeved robe.
why does yours say that instead of coat of many colors?
What's yours say? Or it says a robe with long sleeves. I think we see
Mine
the.
just says robe with many colors.
Really?
Same thing it says.
I don't know.
What translation is that?
This is the Christian Standard Bible. So
What verse are you at?
I am at verse 3.
Oh, a robe of many colors is what I said.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the robe. We all know what it is.
Yeah.
And the significance of it was what? So let's just look at that for a minute. I don't even know.
Why they would change that? What did mine say?
Let's see if I can
Okay,
find
now
it.
mine
Good.
down at the bottom does say this means long sleeves. So I didn't see it up there, but it does say
Yeah.
that.
It says part portion, pieces of colored metal, decorative needlework, reaching to the wrist and the ankles. So the idea here, I'm thinking, is that it's not just clothes for everyday wear. This is like you dress up clothes to draw attention
It's a
to.
fancy outfit.
It's a fancy outfit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and the indication is that to have this means that you're favored by the one that gives it to you. Yeah, and it happens to be the father. And so they, because the father has done this, they hate the brother. Okay? I'm sure that some of that hatred has some leftover effect from being told on by the younger brother. Yeah. So here we have this building. We got to get to a point where what happens in the story is semi-justified. All right. So they hated him and could not bring themselves to speak peaceably to him. Peace. Here's that idea that says that when peace is around, then everything about life is right.
God, you have peace on everything.
Yeah. So to not be able to speak peaceably to him also has the indication of they were doing their best to upset the situation. So he was an outcast by the brothers and most loved by the father. You can imagine what that did in the home. And also the son of the now deceased mother. So creates other problems. Then it goes in verse 5. Then a shift in the scene. That's what then does for us. Then Joseph had a dream. When he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more.
You little punk. You're dreaming we gonna bow down to you.
So he said to them, listen to this dream I had. Okay? There we were, binding sheaves of grain in the field, and suddenly my sheaf stood up, and your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf. Oh my goodness, okay? So God is speaking through this dream. We know that he's done it before, right? We've seen it with his father, Jacob. So we're not too far away from knowing that this is how God does things.
So
But
just
the
I
message,
don't want to chase this rabbit,
Yeah.
but stop in here for a minute because the new friend we met yesterday.
Yeah.
You told me he has all these dreams.
yeah,
You know, there's just I mean, there's numbers of places in Scripture where a dream is mentioned, so we know it matters because it's in Scripture.
right.
Why do people think when they dream that I call it reality? I mean, you know, that it's gonna come.
That it's
to
gonna
pass
come
and
true?
It's gonna happen.
Oh.
I've had crazy dreams, and I've praised God that they haven't. you know,
Yeah,
because I don't always dream.
We
not-
talked about
We
that.
talked about dreams this morning in regards to trying to silently sit and wait on God to speak, and our minds are rolling all the time.
Uh-huh.
And some of that is left over from our mind. When we tell our mind to be quiet and to listen, it thinks, all right, you're going to sleep, and this is where I do all this unraveling. And so it's very hard for some people to find a centered place in meditation and prayer because their brain is still trying to figure out how to do that consciously. So when people have a dream that they feel like it's got to become reality, concrete, they're doing something with dreams that aren't meant to even be done.
I guess
see?
that's where I'm getting at, because I have a friend or two
Yeah.
that they'll tell me a dream, and then something will come to pass that they can line up with the dream, and I'll sit back and go, well, I think this is pretty cool that God spoke to you that way, but he doesn't speak to me that way.
Yeah. And,
You
and
know?
so this is a dream and not a vision, and the scriptures do both. Okay,
That's
when
true.
you pay attention, you'll see. I'm trying to think. Oh, well, the Jacob's ladder.
Yeah.
Okay, that was a dream. All right, his experience with God at the river Jabbok, that was not a dream. It's never stated to be a dream. In fact, it would be more of a vision, a interactive vision that he's having, where he's involved physically
Yeah,
with that.
vision's not really a
Because
dream.
Yeah.
here has
Yeah.
the vision on the rooftop, that was a vision.
That was a vision, not
Yeah,
a dream.
Right.
Yeah. So I think they're two entirely different things, and even in this, it's stated. Well, how does he? Let's see how he says it.
Because he had another one.
Yeah. He says, I had this dream, and let's see. Interesting word. So it just means to dream.
Yeah, hear this dream
Okay.
that I dreamed.
All right. So there are places. This may be a difference. I haven't really thought about it to now. I might be wrong. I have to go do some work. But when in the Bible, when there's a vision, we have a clear understanding of who it's from God.
Right.
Okay. So Peter's vision, he didn't know how clear that vision was until the servants from Cornelius' house knocked on the door, and he knew immediately that God had given him something.
Right.
When Jacob has his vision of the angels coming up and down, he immediately knows that this is a way of God reassuring him on the way to Padam Haram, and he recognizes such and builds an altar to the Lord. Here, Joseph has a dream, and there's no interpretation of what that means. He's just telling them what the dream is, and they never attach it to God at all because they don't even know to. So that may be the difference. Joseph, when he was told to get up and leave Nazareth,
Yeah,
it wasn't
these
in a
friends that have dreams, it's not about God, but something happens, like
yeah,
you know, something came
Yeah.
to pass that lined up with what it wasn't about God.
right.
You know, so that might be the difference than dreams and
Well, that's what we talked about today.
Yeah.
too, Because Satan can
he can
give
also.
you the
Yeah, he can also give you dreams.
Because we talked about some of
Yeah.
my dreams are not good.
Yeah.
They bother me all
Yeah.
day, you know. So I can't
Yeah.
get them at it. I'm up at 2 and 3 in the morning because I don't want to go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's
Yeah.
just they're that bad. But I've been trying to work through that with God and
Yeah.
ask Him to
Taking
take
his
it.
thoughts
Yeah.
captive, Lord.
Yeah,
line up with
take
your
it
word
away,
and
you know,
peace.
because I don't want it anymore, you know. But I don't look at any of that as
Yeah.
being from Him because some of it is just too weird
Yeah.
to be from Him.
Yeah, I think people that get hung up on dreams read too many Destiny Image books.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Just too much of that supernatural thing and trying to bring.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because I really believe that God is purposeful about building walls between the natural and supernatural, because we are not capable. I mean, our struggle is against not against flesh and blood, but by the power and
And he tells us
principalities of the
everywhere,
air.
don't entertain that.
That's right.
Don't
And
do it.
and
Yeah,
we are
I
to,
would go looking for any kind of reality from it, or any kind of meaning from it,
Yeah.
because I just think that they're dreams, and you have to look at my situation. When I've always dreamed, but it's gotten worse since
And-
it's
and
passed, and so that's a
and I really do think a lot of yours is still having to unwind.
yeah.
And man, what a protection it is that we don't have to deal with that in our conscious mind, that our
That
unconscious minds,
happens when you're sleeping or dreaming.
can work through all of those things that would really, who knows what kind of harm it would do us psychologically and mentally. We don't know.
Yeah. But when I wake up, I just, you know how you wake up sometimes you don't remember the dream? I'm not having that problem. I wish I had that problem.
Yeah.
You know, so I just want it to go away. But I don't add any kind of, oh, this is from God. You know, I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to figure out how I can get them to go away.
I didn't work it out on the front end. People I'm worn out before I go to sleep, so I don't have any dreams.
Man.
Well, and like we said, there comes a way of remembering is a way to go to God and say, I want to release this to you
Yeah.
because I'm unable to get it out of my system. I believe he'll do that.
Yeah. And that's what I told him.
And
I'm
if that's the
starting
only
every
way
morning.
the enemy can get to us,
Then he'll use
then
it.
he'll use that.
Yeah.
You know, because
Yeah.
if you're solid and strong everywhere else, well, let's try this.
Yeah, let's
attack
try
right
that.
Here. Let's try this.
Well, that's like he said in that, and that's when he was speaking yesterday. You know, and he walked up to Bert. He said, he can't get in, but he can get on you.
Right.
You know,
That's right.
And that's what I told Stuart today. I said he can't get in you anymore, but he can still get on you.
Yeah.
So you need to fight and stay.
I was
focused
watching
on God,
Bert during
focused on
that
God.
time because he was close to him.
Yeah.
You know, and I thought that was interesting too, that he was on the floor and that
Burke
was-
has struggled.
And yes, and he's one when he was talking about mental illness versus
Yeah.
demonic depression. I mean, oppression. I was just thinking, wow, Lord, look who's sitting on the front row.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I talked to Rebecca today, and I said that pastor didn't even realize he had ex-Wiccan sitting in that thing that was saved. You know,
Yeah.
there you are sitting there because she was Wiccan.
Yeah.
She was Wiccan, and you know, I said, y'all could have sat down and traded some
Well,
stories. She said, oh yeah, we could have, but she
God.
started to cry when she was talking to me this morning. You know, because that affected her, and she's turned away from that, and she's so happy that she did.
Yeah.
You know, it's still real.
Well, God's
yeah.
He's fixing to do something great in that little thing going on.
You know, I'm
That
telling
mental
you,
health grace alliance thing and all they're doing, yeah, it's happening.
I saw
And,
it in our classroom when we were walking through towards the end of experiencing God. I said, God is dealing with her.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, we saw it, we heard it, and I was praying. Oh, I'm thinking, God knows.
Yeah.
God, what do you want for her?
Yeah, I'm seeing a wisdom that he is developing there that's going to really serve him well here, I think.
Yeah.
And then isn't it? What's her name? Is it Mike's wife?
Yeah, Debbie.
Debbie.
Debbie's a
Okay,
part
I
of that
can't ever
group.
figure- She's a part of that
Yeah.
group.
Does she have red hair?
Yeah.
I thought I saw somebody
She's
going
showing
out
up
the
in
classroom.
Sunday school
Yeah.
now, and yeah,
Yeah.
it's opening up some doors and everything else. So I'm so thankful for that class
Yeah.
and for Rebecca. I think she's going to do a lot of good, you know, with teaching and dealing with it.
And when the word gets out, there'll be people coming for that because they need
they'll
it.
come for that. Yeah,
That's exciting.
yeah, it is.
Verse 8, are you really going to reign over us? His brothers asked him,
Who do you think you are?
are you really going to rule over us? Or reign and rule are two things here that we see sandwiched around this bowing down. So they hated him even more. This is the third time that they've mentioned the word hate because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers, like he's a glutton.
Yeah.
Said, look, he said, I had another dream. And this time the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me. No doubt what he's talking about here, right? So he told his father and brothers. And his father rebuked him. What kind of dream is this that you have had? He said. Am I and your mother and your brothers really going to come and bow down to the ground before you?" Now his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. So we have, remember before, the whole thing with the rape. And Jacob was dealing with things in a really measured way. And he gets upset about it. But then that's the last you hear about it. And here we have this where he gets upset, but he's just going to have to work through it. So Jacob is still proven to be the level-headed one after all those years of being the hothead and the trickster. But here they are jealous of him, which means to become heated. So it holds more than just a feeling. It shows a little more strength or weight, I guess.
To their hatred.
Yeah. To be jealous for something means to fight for. So in this situation, what are they fighting for? They're going to fight for their freedom from this rule that he is claiming he's going to have over them. All right, so there's an irony here. Okay, they're wanting freedom, and ultimately they put him into slavery, and through his slavery, they're going to be free.
Yeah.
So the words are not just thrown on the page here. They're helping us tie some things together. So his brothers had gone to pasture their father's flocks at Shechem. Nothing good as much as ever happened in Shechem, by the way. So, and here's just another instance. Israel said to Joseph, "Your brothers, are pasturing the flocks at Shechem. Get ready. I'm sending you to them." "I'm ready," Joseph replied. Then Israel said to him, "Go and see how your brothers in the flocks are doing, and bring word back to me." So he went. So he sent him.
So is Daddy sending him out to tattle again?
Well, that's an interesting thing.
Go spy on your brothers and come back and tell me what they're doing.
I'm thinking maybe he's kind of pushing that along now,
Yeah.
Mark. That's not.
But Joseph
He's
is
helping
also
him to
the
be a
baby,
tattletale.
or is Benjamin the baby?
Benjamin's the
Benjamin's the
But he's
baby,
down at the youngest though, right?
but he's too young.
Yeah.
Yeah,
'Cause I'm thinking, how many mamas don't you mess with the baby?
Yeah.
Whatever the baby says.
Yeah.
Because I remember putting Chase up against the wall one time saying, "Don't you treat my baby."
I remember you telling me
He
about
might
that.
be your brother, but I'll take you out.
You came in on me one day doing something to me.
Yeah.
Well, you could really look at this and say, "I'm sending you to them." Okay, what actually happens later? He sends the brothers to Egypt. So ultimately, they are sent to Joseph in the end. So we kind of begin to see these contrasting literary devices that really become rich later that we can't see now.
Yeah.
And there is a thing, if we can look at it either way. If he's sending them to kind of be a spy on his brothers, well, then the joke really is on Jacob, because now he winds up believing he lost a son that was killed.
Yeah.
Either way, it's not a good situation that could have occurred here. So he tells him to go. So he went with him. So he sent him from the Hebron Valley, and he went to Shechem. So he went to this place where it's rich and fertile and wonderful home, and he sent him to this place where nothing really ever good happens at Shechem. So a man found him there, wandering in the field, and he asked him, "What are you looking for?" "I'm looking for my brothers," Joseph said. "Can you tell me where they are pasturing the flocks?" "They've moved on from here," the man said. "I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" Okay, so Joseph set out after his brothers and found them at Dothan. They saw him in the distance, and before he had reached them, they plotted to kill him. So it's like the interlude between Shechem and Dothan gives them time to figure out what they're going to do. The next time we see Joseph, we know what we're going to do. We're going to kill him.
So how far do you think that is that he had to go?
From, I don't know,
Walking.
walking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
surely.
Yeah.
And then he's a young man, 17 or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's like,
So, look,
find the map.
walking 3 miles a day. It's a ways, but they could see him off in a distance, so it's open country. I used to have.
It kind of looks mountainous the way they have it on this map.
I'm looking for. I had a tag
Yeah,
here
so
for
it's up
maps.
there against the Mediterranean Sea.
Yeah, where Dothan is.
I see.
It's kinda in the
Yeah,
plain
Hebron
out there.
Then Shechem, but then
Yeah, he goes from Hebron he goes through Maine, Mamre, Bethlehem,
Right.
Salem, Bethel, and A, and Shechem, and then Dothan. So they had to go a long way, huh?
Yeah,
With that flock.
it's a big country.
Man.
Man, I don't know
Oh,
what
it's
happened
not-
to my maps. I gotta figure out how to.
I guess Egypt would be.
Anyway, yeah, it's a good ways, but they see him coming, and they decided they're going to kill him. They said one to the other, "Oh look, here comes the dream expert." So now, come on, let's kill him and throw him into one of the pits. So these pits, they're dry wells, is what they are. They would dig these wells, these cisterns. And when the rains came, the rainy season, it would fill them and they would have water. So that's what they're planning on doing. So you can take that cistern idea and just go all the way with the whole water thing. This is a lifeless situation that we're approaching here.
And it still matters today, everything.
Oh yeah, yeah,
They still praying for the rains and the cisterns to be full.
that's right.
Just modern day, not the biblical fill up the holes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're praying it all over California. They should be praying it all over California. We can say that a vicious animal ate him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams. So we can kind of run all the way back to Cain killing Abel out of his jealousy, and here we are again repeating the same thing. It's a conspiracy of God's people now wanting to commit this. So in the center part of this whole narrative is the dream. That's the problem, is the dream. And we're going to find later in chapter 47 that was the whole point. That's that God gave him the dream. Okay? And so what they're using as an excuse to kill, God is using to prepare for life. And so it kind of these contrasting ways of looking, which is what the Hebrew writer's famous for. So when Reuben's the oldest, heard this, he tried to save him from them. So the writer kind of segregates Reuben out. He's going to do something different. Don't shed blood. Throw him into this pit in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him, intending to rescue him from them and return him to his father. So now Reuben has got his own little thing going on here, but we're just going to pretend to leave him here in this cistern. And as we go off, I'm going to circle back, get him out of the hole, and return him to his father. The right thing to do. The chicken way to do it, but the right
He
thing.
was at least trying to do something right.
Yeah. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped off Joseph's robe, the long-sleeved robe, or the coat of many colors that he had on him. Then they took him and threw him into the pit. The pit was empty without water. They sat down to eat a meal. They were quite satisfied with themselves at this point.
My husband would call that criminal minds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you can do such a crime
Yeah.
and sit down and
Yeah,
eat.
sit down and
That's
eat.
right.
I get it.
Yeah. So a meal was an act of hospitality for those, but here they are. No hospitality for Joseph. It says, so they sat down to eat a meal, and when they looked up, there was a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were carrying aromatic gum, balsam, and resin, going down to Egypt. Going down to Egypt. Okay? So we get the first language here of where all of this is heading. So the Ishmaelites, distant cousins that they're going to sell Joseph to. So Judah said to his brothers, "What do we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come on, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay a hand on him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." And his brothers agreed. So selling one into slavery is always better than killing them. Yeah.
I guess that's what sex traffickers think too. Let's just go grab all these kids and just
Yeah.
sell them because they'll be better off doing
Yeah.
that than let's murder them, rape them, and murder them.
It's-
Boy,
yeah.
sin sick world.
It is.
It is.
And it was then. So the thinking
Nothing
is,
new under the sun.
why waste his blood when we can make money?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what they're going to do. And that's the story of slavery.
Yeah.
Why let this blood run free when we can sell it and enslave it? And that's what he's doing here. So the brothers agreed. When the Midianite traders passed by, his brothers pulled Joseph out of the pit and sold him for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took Joseph to Egypt. Okay, so our first case of human trafficking
Yeah, right.
across national borders.
Nothing new.
Nothing new. That's right. And the Midian and the you see they went from Ishmaelites to Midianites. Okay, because they were from Midian, but this is still Ishmael's offspring. They think nothing of doing this. So buying and selling people has become a way of life. And whatever reason they gave for wanting to sell Joseph probably didn't matter. When Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. So this all happened while Reuben was gone. He went back to his brothers and said, "The boy is gone. What am I going to do?" So they took Joseph's robe, slaughtered a male goat, and dipped the robe in its blood. They sent the long-sleeved robe to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it. It is your son's robe. Is it your son's robe or not?" So they sent it to him. I'm assuming by a slave or someone that's in service to him.
And it
But they
wasn't
won't.
that- They didn't ask. They didn't say, "See if it's our brother's robe. See if it's your son's robe."
Yeah,
They
yeah.
didn't even claim him as a brother.
Yeah.
It sounds like.
But look at how they're distancing themselves from the whole situation.
Yeah.
They had not even thought far enough ahead to tell their father what had happened to Joseph when they sold him. They all had money in their pockets. They were going to show back up with money in their pockets, but they weren't going to have a reason. So Reuben, the one not wanting to do any of this to the degree that it's unfolded.
He's grief stricken when you tear your clothes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's tough.
Yeah. So here it is.
So did they? I'm not understanding. Did the brothers tell him they had sold him, or did he just think that they had killed him?
It never says. It just says that he's
Yeah.
missing. Okay, so that adds to the intrigue. I'm glad you brought that out because they did it in a commentary. So this is kind of a mysterious disappearance of Joseph. Reuben is identifying with it. The other brothers have made it happen. But now he's going to be going down into Egypt. And from their perspective, Joseph's gone.
Yeah, they're just saying that it's an animal has devoured it.
Yeah.
Dipped it in blood. So, I mean,
Yeah.
they're making it look like, no matter what they're telling him,
Right.
we're wanting you to think he's dead.
So all of this is precipitated by dreams that God provides Joseph. And God knows Joseph's sons well enough. He knows what's going to happen. Okay? Is all this by accident? Well, of course not. When we get down to the place where they show up in Egypt and there's Joseph, unbeknownst to them, they still think that he's that he's been sold into
to
slavery, and he's a slave.
I have no clue he's the head honcho.
Yeah. So we're given this picture here of, man, everything is going wrong. The favorite son is dead. The lie has now produced a make-believe, not the favorite son is dead, he's sold into slavery. The lie has produced a death that hasn't occurred. I mean, you start just putting it all together. There's just all sorts of ways for this to go bad. The only way that it can't go bad is for Joseph to be lost in exile in Egypt. And that's what they're counting on. Never being found out. So in 33, his father recognized it. He said, "It is my son's robe," he said. "A vicious animal has devoured him. Joseph has been torn to pieces," so he's just crying out this. Then Jacob tore his clothes, put sackcloth around his waist, and mourned for his son many days. So the normal mourning period was about 7 to 10 days. But
that's what they're doing with the queen, 10 days.
Yeah, 10 days.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But this says many days. It's like the narrative is saying he never has gotten over this grief. He's projecting that into the story. All his sons and daughters tried to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. He did not want to forget his son. Now, this is it is a traumatic event for his life. Here's a man that's up in age, and he hasn't lost any of his offspring.
And then he's losing a favorite baby.
And then he's losing the favorite one. So that has overtures that are cosmic in nature too, a bit. He said, "No," he said, "I will go down to Sheol to my son mourning." And his father wept for him. So the solution to the problem for Jacob is now death. If I could just die, and then I would be in the place where my son is. This is the lowest of low that a person can reach, wanting death. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and the captain of the guards. So we get this little glimpse, okay, Joseph's not dead. Everybody, his father is ready to die, believing that his son is dead. The children can't do anything to help their father, so they're alienated from him because he is in this grief. So things at home are horrible. And here we're given this little one-verse thing that says, "Oh, and by the way, Joseph's okay."
He's down there in Egypt.
Yeah, he's down there in Egypt. And not only has he been sold into slavery, but he's a pretty important guy. We're given this foreshadowing look into what God is doing, although God is not mentioned.
He's not just sold to some family. He's sold to the captain of the guard.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a guy that has audience with Pharaoh. So we don't know what that means yet.
Joseph had to be young, good-looking, handsome, probably with his father. A good, strong buck.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
let's give him to these top dogs.
That's right.
He'll make a good slave for them.
Yeah.
Because of course she wanted him too, so he
Yeah.
had to be, desirable or whatever. So.
And
Yeah.
they probably thought they'd get better money selling him someplace
Somebody like
like
him.
that than they would just selling him off a block somewhere.
Yeah, I can see the movie now, the blocking of the movie where they show up with this strong, handsome young man, and they already know this is a top dollar prize here.
Yeah.
We're gonna sell it not to the highest bidder, but the one that's gonna appreciate our efforts.
Yeah.
You know,
Bringing him to
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
We paid, so many shekels for him, but we're gonna get a lot more shekels.
yeah, yeah.
You know.
All right, so Judah and Tamar. Here we go.
Whole nother story.
A whole nother story, and it's kind of shoved in here.
I was thinking, it was funny because the way I'm thinking, and then we're going to go off the side here, do Judah.
Okay, so
but it matters.
Yeah.
How we
Yeah,
get to do her.
we
Yeah.
gotta see where the writer is trying to get our attention directed. What episodes in this story may parallel what's going on in the Joseph story, or contrast to it, or how it even more importantly affects the brothers or the father. because they're still in this not a good place. So at that time, Judah left his brothers and settled near an Adullamite named Hira. There Judah saw the daughter of a Canaanite named Shua. He took her as a wife and slept with her. She conceived and gave birth to a son, and he named him She conceived again, gave birth to a son, and named him Onan. She gave birth to another son and named him Shelah. It is at Shezib that she gave birth to him. Judah got a wife for the firstborn, and her name was Tamar.
So lots and lots of time has passed by.
There's lots of stuff going on here.
In 3 verses, we got 2 generations.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Lots of time has passed. And see, the last time we heard from Judah, what was his deal?
He was going to kill him.
We're going to kill him. So then he winds up saying, let's just pretend we killed him.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's deception going on here. He's deceived his father. And so when it comes to honoring genealogy, that's really the worst thing you can do, right? Lie to your father, manipulate your father, which is what he's done. So here we are. Judah got a wife for his firstborn, and who was named, and her name was Tamar. Now Judah's firstborn, was evil in the Lord's sight, and the Lord put him to death. So here God's in control of this story.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
Then Judah said to Onan, sleep with your brother's wife, perform your duty as her brother-in-law, and produce offspring for your brother. But Onan knew that the offspring would not be his. So whenever he slept with his brother's wife, he released his semen on the ground so that he would not produce offspring for his brother. So he wanted nothing to do with honoring his brother.
And he was wicked. In the sight.
Yeah.
It's like, you boys are all bad.
Yeah. What he did was evil in the Lord's sight. So he put him to death. So, man, Judah's losing
God wasn't
sons.
messing around at the beginning back there. It's like, you don't want to serve me? I'll just be done.
Yeah, let's bring up the next man up.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it says that Judah went down from his brothers, turned aside to a certain Adullamite name, whatever her name was. But if he went down from his brothers, he was kind of getting off away from them.
Yeah, yeah.
So maybe he felt bad about what he had done.
There's a fracturing,
or
see?
he's hiding.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's running away from what he had
Yeah,
done.
good point. There's a fracturing in the family, and as he moves away from his family, he's really getting himself into a mess here.
Yeah, because I mean these grandbabies are turning out really
Yeah.
awful.
Yeah.
And God apparently thinks so too.
Yep.
Because I mean he's taken them.
So he says, then Judah said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, remain a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up. For he thought he might die too, like the others. So Tamar went to live in her father's house. So here we have the daughter-in-law. She's been separated from those who are supposed to cleave to her and to care for her. Okay? After a long time, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shua, died. Okay? When Judah had finished mourning, he and his friend Hira, the Adullamite, went up to Timnah to his sheep shearers. Tamar was told, your father-in-law is going to be at Timnah to shear his sheep. So she took off her widow's clothes, veiled her face, covered herself, and sat at the entrance to Enaim, which is on the way to Timnah. For she saw that, though Shelah had grown up, she had not been given to him as a wife. Okay.
So was she not in the household anymore?
She's not in the household. She went
Because
back to her dad's.
There's even more time passed.
That's right.
Because we got another generation.
Yeah.
'Cause
So
he was a
so
baby
Shelah,
then, so he's grown
yeah,
up.
now he's grown up,
But his last over here is she remained in.
she went back to her
Oh,
father's
her
house.
Actually, okay, never mind.
Yeah.
Judah was father-in-law. Never mind.
Yeah.
Never mind.
So here we have total forgetfulness by Judah. He doesn't care a thing about Tamar.
So was it forgetfulness, or he just told her to go back and hoping she'd stay there and he'd marry him off some
Well,
other kind of way?
The scripture says that Shelah was supposed to grow up, and then he would give
So
her to Shelah, okay? But it says in there that he's afraid that he might die too. So the underlying thing is he says he's going to do this thing, but he also fears for the life of his son because the others have all died.
Yeah, because
So he, in
well,
essence,
not really because of her,
but they weren't obedient.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so,
but maybe he
Yeah.
considered her like a bad luck charm or something. Like,
well, he
well,
may
but
have.
I think he's pretty more on the, I think he, like you said, forgetfulness, because he's not even going to know her.
Yeah,
You know,
and
he's not even enough time passed.
yeah.
He doesn't even know who she is.
well, part of it is I'm not going to send Shelah to marry her because it's bad luck, like
Yeah.
you said. So he tells her one thing and then puts her out of his mind.
Yeah.
That chapter in our life
It's
is
both,
over.
It's both and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But she gets word, okay, that he's coming, and as is the practice, evidently, when you're on the way to the sheep shearers, you have activity with prostitutes.
Yeah.
Because this seems to be the normal way of going about life at this point. So she goes and she takes off her she has been widowed now for a very long time. She veils her face.
I'm not getting that. You gonna wear a widow's clothes for all these years?
She's doing exactly precisely what is expected of her.
She's waiting for
And
Sheba
Judah is
with
doing nothing that is expected of him.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
she's waiting for that child to grow up. So
Yeah.
she's remaining a widow to have him.
Yeah,
To stay in that family.
that's right.
Yeah. But they, like you said, they
Which is what the rules of culture said. Once you were in the family, if your husband died, then it was his
and
brother's
culturally, It was
responsibility.
probably better for her to be a widow than to be an older single person. You
Oh,
know?
yeah.
So I mean, they knew she had married and had lost a husband.
Yeah.
And so she was just waiting for the next, because the women were just property then too.
Oh yeah.
You know, so she was not a burden on her father because she's walking around in the widow's clothes.
Right.
And they're all, because otherwise he would have to be out there bargaining to get rid of his kids.
But I know the son is younger, but why couldn't Judah? They had a lot of wives. Why couldn't Judah take her on as a wife?
Well,
Was that just a big no-no, or?
no, it probably would have been a no-no, but it probably would have been acceptable at this point had something happened to Shelah. But see, decorum says the brothers
It
are
should
to
be
take
the
care.
brothers.
They are their brother's keeper.
Yeah.
And for the father to step in, then it upsets the order of things. Okay, there's still the one son left, and what Judah has done is withheld him. He has saved his son. Are you beginning to get it?
Mm-hmm.
He killed his brother, but he is saving his son. All right, but let's see what happens, because this is when it really gets rich. All right, so when Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. He went over to her and said, "Come, let me sleep with you," for he did not know that it was his daughter-in-law. She said,
It was all out of his mind.
"Yeah, oh no, that's long past, yeah." So she says, "What will you give me for sleeping? What will you give me for sleeping with me?" "I will send you a young goat from my flock," he replied. But she said, "Only if you leave something with me until you send it." "What should I give you?" he asked. "Oh, your signet ring and your cord and the staff of your hand."
These
Now,
very important things.
the ring
Goodness,
couldn't do
she's
without.
asking for everything.
Okay, the cord around his robe, they were known. You could spot a person. And then same thing his staff. Very distinguished to the person. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So he gave them to her and slept with her, and she became pregnant with him, by him. She got up and left, then removed her veil and put on her widow's clothes back on. So now who's the deceiver?
They all right along there with it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Judah had deceived Jacob, and now Tamar has deceived Judah. When Judah sent the young goat back by his friend, the Adullamite, in order to get back the items he had left with the woman, he could not find her. he asked the men of the place, "Where is the cult prostitute who was beside the road at in Enaim?" So he calls her a cult prostitute this time. "There has been no cult prostitute here," they answered. So the Adullamite returned to Judah, saying, "I could not find her, and besides, the men of that place said, there has been no cult prostitute here." So she's done her job well. She has done this, and then she has just melted into the woodwork. So Judah replied, "Let her keep the items for herself, otherwise we will become a laughingstock. After all, I did send this young goat, but you couldn't find her." So what is he saying here? Oh Lord, let her keep it, if and maybe nobody will know any different.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I'll be able to keep this a secret, like I've done with my brother. Okay.
And like I'm hiding my son.
About 3 months later, Judah was told, "Your daughter-in-law, Tamar, has been acting like a prostitute, and now she's pregnant." Oh my goodness. So the word has gotten out. She probably let it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, I'm gonna show you.
So this daughter-in-law that you've forgotten all about and denied what was due her in the care of the family is now being wrongly accused of being a prostitute. But we know that she is pregnant. So bring her out, Judah said, and let her be burned to death. Okay, who quick to judge.
Yeah, it's okay for me to be with one, but it's not okay for them to be one.
Well, he's pronouncing judgment on his own son. See, he's pronouncing judgment on the very child that he's been trying to produce through his sons. So everything about what Judah is doing is wrong. Everything that he has done is wrong. We can't find anything good about what he's doing, and yet he's the lion. It just goes to show God can choose whoever he wants to do to carry out his program, even someone like Judah. So as she was being brought out, she sent her father-in-law this message, "I am pregnant by the man to whom these items belong." And she added, "Examine them. Whose signet ring, cord, and staff are these?" So Judah recognized them and said, "She is more in the right than I, since I did not give her to my son Shelah, and he did not know her intimately again." So now he's put in his place. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twins in her womb. And as she was giving birth, one of them put out his hand, and the midwife took it and tied a scarlet thread around it, announcing, "This one came out first." But then he pulled his hand back. Out came his brother, and she said, "What a breakout you have made for yourself." So he was named Perez. Then his brother, who had the scarlet thread tied to his hand, came out, and he was named Zerah. So you wonder why this story is thrown in the middle of this, and it is to help us understand two things: the injustice of Judah in his deception and then being deceived is no longer an injustice. It is what it was necessary to bring about justice. Okay, so the writer's they're not legalist here. They're all about achieving what is right by any means necessary. So we're given this better picture of Judah and who he is. He did this thing with Joseph and faked his death and deceived his dad and let him be in this mourning. And then he goes through this whole thing with Tamar and his sons, and he's fearful that she truly is someone that can bring harm to his house. So he writes her off and doesn't do the right thing by her and doesn't teach his sons to do the right thing. And then ultimately she has to become a deceiver in order to achieve justice. And in the end, the deceiver recognizes it and says that she is more right than me. So we kind of get this foreshadowing, because this is what happens with Joseph, right? At the end, he winds up before his brothers, who has deceived everybody, and ultimately he is the one that is going to bring about righteousness and justice for them as well. as well as all the world, the known world at the time. I love that story because of the attention that it draws to. God's in this, okay, and God is not embarrassed to have all of this, what we would seem to be, kind of racy and moral behavior going on. God doesn't mind engaging in that in this time in culture in order to bring about the justice that he wants for Tamar.
Yeah, what he wants to happen.
Yeah.
Isn't Tamar the lineage of, was it Ruth and then there's somebody else that comes on down to David?
I think so.
Yeah. Tamar's in that family.
Yeah, so God puts all this together, and why is it so important to him? Because he is not going to allow for injustice. He holds the power over what is just and unjust, and will deal with it on his terms. And we're taught that here, and then we're reminded of it on the cross. That I'm dealing with the injustice of sin.
Well, and even with Joseph,
in the way that
the
he's
time comes with the brothers.
Yes. Oh, yeah, it's the great foreshadowing of Jesus. Yeah, we don't even have to go all the way to the cross and to see it play out in its fullness. That's as far as we'll go today. So, bye.
Good stuff, preacher.
I sure like it.